You would never knowingly do something that hurts your brain. You would never sit down every morning and make a choice that slowly chips away at your memory, your focus, your ability to think clearly. But there is a very real possibility that you are doing exactly that right now. Not because you are careless, not because you lack discipline, but because nobody ever told you the truth about what certain everyday foods are doing inside your head over time. I want you to think about someone for a moment. Her name was Carol, 71 years old, sharp as a tack her entire life. Retired school teacher, crossword puzzles every morning, never missed a beat in conversation. But over about 2 years, something subtle started shifting. She would walk into a room and forget why she was there. She would lose words mid-sentence, words she had used 1,000 times before. Her family noticed before she did. They assumed it was just aging. Her doctor ran the standard tests and everything looked normal. It was not until a different specialist sat down with Carol and spent an hour going through her daily routine, not her medications, not her family history, but what she ate every single day, that the picture started to come into focus. Carol was not doing anything dramatic. She was not eating fast food 3 times a day or drinking soda by the liter. She was eating the way millions of people eat. Cereal in the morning, a sandwich at lunch, something packaged and convenient for dinner, a little something sweet in the evening to wind down. Completely ordinary, completely unremarkable, and according to a growing body of neuroscience research, potentially devastating for the brain over a long period of time. That is what we are going to talk about today. Not fear, not doom, but the actual science of what happens inside your brain when certain foods become a daily habit, and more importantly, what you can do about it starting right now. Here is the first thing you need to understand. Your brain is not separate from what you eat. It is made of what you eat. Every membrane of every neuron, every chemical messenger firing between cells, every protective layer wrapped around your neural pathways, all of it is constructed from the raw materials your diet provides. When those materials are high quality, your brain builds and maintains itself well. When those materials are poor quality, the structure suffers. And the structure suffering does not announce itself with a headline. It happens quietly, gradually, across months and years, until one day the symptoms are impossible to ignore. The single most studied and most consistently problematic category is ultra-processed food. Now, I want to be careful here because this term gets thrown around loosely, and it tends to make people defensive. Ultra-processed does not just mean junk food. It does not just mean chips and candy bars. It includes things that carry health halos, flavored yogurts, packaged granola, breakfast cereals with words like whole grain on the front, protein bars, low-fat crackers, microwave meals, flavored instant oatmeal. These products go through extensive industrial processing that fundamentally changes their chemical structure, strips out nutrients, and introduces a long list of additives, emulsifiers, artificial flavors, and preservatives that your brain has never encountered in its evolutionary history. A landmark study published in JAMA Neurology followed more than 10,000 adults over 8 years and found that those who got more than 20% of their daily calories from ultra-processed foods had a significantly faster rate of cognitive decline compared to those who ate less of them. Not slightly faster, significantly faster, and the association held even after researchers controlled for overall calorie intake, physical activity, education, and other lifestyle factors. The food itself, independent of everything else, was linked to how quickly the brain deteriorated. Why does this happen? The mechanism is not mysterious. It comes down to 3 interconnected pathways that ultra-processed foods disrupt simultaneously. The first is inflammation. Chronic low-grade inflammation in the brain, what researchers now call neuroinflammation, is one of the most reliable predictors of cognitive decline. It damages the blood-brain barrier, disrupts communication between neurons, and accelerates the accumulation of the toxic proteins associated with conditions like Alzheimer's disease. Ultra-processed foods are uniquely good at triggering this inflammatory response because of the combination of refined carbohydrates, industrial seed oils, and chemical additives they contain. Each of those components on its own is problematic. Together, they create a sustained inflammatory environment that the brain cannot easily recover from with just one good night of sleep or one healthy meal. The second pathway is blood sugar dysregulation. This one surprises people because they do not think of blood sugar as a brain issue. But your brain is the most glucose-hungry organ in your entire body, consuming roughly 20% of your total energy supply. The problem is not glucose itself. The problem is the violent swings in blood sugar that come from a diet built around refined carbohydrates and added sugars. When blood sugar spikes dramatically and then crashes, the brain experiences something very close to a fuel crisis. During the crash, concentration becomes difficult. Memory formation is impaired, mental clarity disappears, and when this cycle happens day after day, meal after meal, year after year, the cumulative toll on neural tissue is substantial. Research from the University of California, Los Angeles, has shown that a diet high in fructose, the type of sugar found in enormous quantities in processed foods and sweetened beverages, actually alters gene expression in the brain in ways that impair learning and memory. That is not a minor finding. That is the architecture of thought being rewritten by what is in your food. The third pathway is the gut-brain axis. This is the most recent area of intensive research, and honestly one of the most fascinating. Your gut contains what scientists call the enteric nervous system, a vast network of neurons that communicates directly and constantly with your brain through the vagus nerve. The bacteria living in your gut produce neurotransmitters, including serotonin, dopamine precursors, and GABA, chemicals that directly regulate your mood, your cognitive function, and your stress response. When your diet is dominated by ultra-processed foods, the diversity and health of your gut microbiome collapses. The beneficial bacteria that produce these critical compounds decline, the harmful bacteria that promote inflammation flourish, and the result is a gut that is sending the wrong signals to your brain around the clock. Studies have now linked poor gut microbiome diversity to increased rates of depression, anxiety, brain fog, and early cognitive decline. The gut is not just digesting your food, it is participating in your mental life. Every time you eat something, you are not just feeding yourself. You are feeding the ecosystem that partially governs how your brain functions. Now here is where I want to bring in another name. Robert, 68 years old. He came in not with memory complaints, but with what he described as a gradual dulling. He said it felt like thinking through fog. He used to read 2 books a month. He had stopped because he could not retain what he read well enough to enjoy it. His career had been in engineering. He was precise, systematic, sharp. But he had noticed over 3 or 4 years a kind of mental slowness that he could not explain and that his annual checkups had not caught. When we looked at his diet, the pattern was almost identical to Carol's in structure, even though the specific foods were different. The through line was daily consumption of processed food, very little dietary fiber, very little omega-3 fatty acid, almost no polyphenol-rich vegetables and fruits. He was starving his brain not of calories but of the specific compounds the brain needs to maintain itself. Within 4 months of meaningful dietary change, not perfection, but genuine consistent change, Robert described a lifting of that fog. His reading came back. His confidence in conversation returned. He said it felt like turning the lights back on in a room that had been slowly dimming for years. I want to be honest with you about something. These changes do not happen overnight, and the damage done by years of a poor diet does not reverse itself in a week. But the brain is remarkably plastic. It retains the capacity to repair, to grow new connections, to restore function, far more than most people realize. What determines whether that happens is whether you give it the raw materials it needs to do so. The contrast between what damages the brain and what rebuilds it is actually quite clear when you look at the research as a whole. Where ultra-processed foods drive inflammation, foods rich in omega-3 fatty acids actively resolve it. Fatty fish, walnuts, flax seeds. These contain EPA and DHA, the specific fatty acids that form the structural foundation of your neuron membranes and that have been shown in multiple large studies to reduce the rate of brain volume loss with age. Your brain physically shrinks less when these fats are consistently present in your diet. That is not a small thing. Where refined sugars disrupt the brain's fuel system, complex carbohydrates paired with fiber stabilize it. Lentils, beans, sweet potatoes, oats in their intact whole form. These release glucose slowly and steadily, giving the brain the consistent energy supply it needs without the spikes and crashes that impair function and damage tissue over time. Where processed food starves the gut microbiome, fermented foods and dietary fiber feed it. Kimchi, kefir, plain yogurt without the added sugar, sauerkraut. These introduce beneficial bacteria directly, and a diverse range of vegetables, fruits, legumes, and whole grains provides the prebiotic fiber those bacteria need to survive and thrive. Where industrial seed oils, the refined corn, soy, and sunflower oils that dominate processed food production, promote inflammatory signaling, extra virgin olive oil does the opposite. It contains oleocanthal, a natural compound that research has shown inhibits the same inflammatory enzymes targeted by ibuprofen. It crosses the blood-brain barrier and appears to help clear the toxic proteins linked to Alzheimer's disease. There is a reason the Mediterranean diet, which is built around olive oil as its primary fat, consistently outperforms almost every other dietary pattern in studies of cognitive aging. And where the food system has stripped your diet of polyphenols, the plant compounds found in berries, dark leafy greens, green tea, dark chocolate, and coffee, those same compounds have been shown to directly stimulate the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. BDNF is essentially the brain's growth hormone. It promotes the formation of new neural connections, supports the survival of existing neurons, and is one of the strongest biological predictors of cognitive resilience as you age. The more BDNF your brain produces, the better your capacity to learn, to remember, and to maintain sharpness across decades. Here is what I want you to take away from this. Not a strict set of rules, not a diet plan to follow perfectly, but a shift in how you understand the relationship between what is on your plate and what is happening in your mind. Every meal is either contributing to the inflammation, the blood sugar chaos, and the gut disruption that quietly degrades your brain over time, or it is providing the specific compounds that protect, repair, and sustain it. You do not have to change everything at once, but you do have to start somewhere. And the place that tends to have the most immediate impact is your daily habits, not the occasional indulgence, the daily habits. The breakfast you have every morning without thinking about it. The thing you reach for automatically at lunch. The evening routine that includes something processed out of habit rather than hunger. Those daily repetitions are where brain health is won or lost over a lifetime. Start by looking at what you eat most days, not your worst days, your normal days, and ask honestly how much of it is coming out of a package with an ingredient list longer than a paragraph. How much of it is built around refined flour, added sugar, or industrial oils. How much of it contains almost no fiber, almost no omega-3s, almost no polyphenols. That honest accounting is more valuable than any specific diet recommendation I could give you. Carol, by the way, is doing better. It took time. It took consistency. It took her family's support and her own willingness to take seriously something most people dismiss as too simple to matter. But the fog has lifted considerably. She is back to her crosswords. She does not walk into rooms and forget why she is there nearly as often. She described it recently as getting herself back, not perfectly, not all the way, but meaningfully and genuinely back. Your brain is not a fixed thing. It is a living structure that responds to what you feed it every single day. The science on this is no longer preliminary or tentative. It is substantial, consistent, and increasingly impossible to ignore. The question is not whether what you eat affects your brain. It clearly does. The question is whether you are going to use that knowledge or set it aside for another year while the daily habits continue unchanged. The most powerful thing you can do for your cognitive future does not require a prescription. It does not require a specialist or an expensive supplement. It requires a fork and a decision made consistently, one meal at a time.